我一直都在说买游艇要有点数，知道需要多少钱。柴油鸭是国产游艇里面最划算和最安全的存在。但是真的开船体验游艇和航行生活需要多少费用呢？剧透低得吓人。今天带你来了解柴油鸭船东的真实费用情况，是不是你也能轻松享受航海生活呢？评论区见。
Welcome back, everyone. So I've been asked a few times how much it costs to run our boat up the inside passage. So last summer we left from Washington State up through British Columbia and then into Alaska all the way up to Sitka. So we thought we'd do a video on some of the expenses that you can expect to pay when doing the inside passages and how much things are along that route. So we give you a breakdown of fuel, of food, and other expenses. So overall, it is either this price or this price. And so stay tuned and I'll let you know how much we paid. Thanks. So some of the expenses you can expect to pay on the inside passage obviously are fuel, and that's our biggest expense. So I'll get right into it. So when we left Seattle, we had around 250 gallons, 300 gallons in the boat, and this boat holds almost 2,000 gallons. So we were able to make it up to Ketchikan for the first round of fuel that we got. We got 1,000 gallons of fuel. It was about $4.15 a gallon, and so that equals out to about $4,156 for that 1,000 gallons. Alaska is probably the cheapest fuel that you can get on the West Coast until you get down to Mexico. So in the Washington area, Oregon area, it's about $5.50 to about $5.50 a gallon, and then down in California, it's around $6.20 a gallon at if you're getting marine fuel. So Alaska is kind of like where we fill up. Usually Ketchikan and Sitka have around the same fuel prices. We end up getting that 1,000 gallons, and then before we left Alaska to come down to British Columbia, we got another 402 gallons, which is around $1,704. And the only reason we got that, it was just simply because the fuel was a good price and we could hold that amount of fuel. Then after that, for this last 6-month period, we got about $88 in tender fuel. We run a high field tender with a 25 horsepower outboard on it. And then we also spent $87.97 in Prince Rupert for a additive called Stanidine, which we put in our diesel fuel that goes in the main engine of the boat. And then so for the total is $6,035 that we got in fuel and an additive. But again, that fuel is probably going to last us a couple of years, so that's not like a yearly occurrence. So kind of looking at how much fuel that we spent this summer, we went about 3,000 miles all summer. And so we spent probably about 450 to 500 gallons of fuel going 3,000 miles. So in that 6-month time period, we spent right around $1,588 just in fuel for 6 months. A lot of this stuff too, again, is next summer we won't be spending that much, or the next time we go back through British Columbia and up into Alaska, we won't be getting fuel unless it's super low, and we just want to get it because the boat can go up the inside passage 3 or 4 times without getting fuel. Our next major expense was for food. So we left from Washington last year. In the Washington area, Seattle area, we spent about $1,000 for shelf-stable stuff, frozen foods, non-perishables, and we spent about $1,000 on that before we went up across the border into Canada. The reason we didn't get many vegetables and fruits and that kind of stuff is because they're kind of stringent bringing that stuff across the border. So we usually stop in Canada and get that. And Our first stop in Canada was at Campbell River, where we spent about $50 to pick up some fruit and vegetables and some bread and whatnot. The prices in Canada we thought would be a little bit better. The conversion rate is about 73 cents on the US dollar. So even with that, there wasn't big savings going into British Columbia and shopping when it came to food. Canadians seem to be paying some pretty high prices. Now again, we're in not super remote places yet, but Campbell River, stopped at Shearwater and Prince Rupert. Those are not, kind of on the main track. A lot of that stuff has to be brought in either by barge or trucks coming up Vancouver Island. Our second stop was at Prince Rupert, where we spent $170. And some of that is fishing supplies. Most of it was food, but we did get some fishing supplies there. They have a couple good fishing stores that we stopped at to get some lures and whatnot. And then from there, the next stop was in Ketchikan, where we, again, coming across from Prince Rupert into Alaska. Again, vegetables and fruits are not permitted across the border in big numbers. If you have a couple of potatoes or something like that, they don't frown upon that too much. But if you're bringing a lot of fruit and vegetables, they could stop you or come aboard and destroy the vegetables and stuff, so you don't bring them in. But we stopped in Ketchikan and we spent about $350 there. And we got quite a bit of food there because we knew we wouldn't be stopping anywhere for a long time thereafter. And then the next stop was later in Ketchikan, where we spent another $300. Again, we were gone for this is a 6-month time frame where we spent all of this. And so we spent quite a couple months in the Sitka area. So we spent quite a bit of money there. And then the last one was we stopped at Thorn Bay on our way back down south, where we spent $50. That's kind of a remote area where they bring in a lot of food on shuttles that they take passengers back and forth, and they throw fruits and vegetables and some other frozen items on these boats to bring it out to more remote communities. So in total, on food, we spent about $1,915 in that 6 months. Again, a lot of it was bought in Washington State before we went up, and we ended up still having quite a bit because we caught quite a bit of fish this year. So we ate a lot of salmon and halibut this summer, so we didn't have to spend too much on food. We still have a lot of pork and beef and that kind of stuff that we just didn't eat because we ate a lot of fish. So some of the other fees that you can look at or could possibly spend money on going the inside passage are marinas. Now, we spent 6 months there, like I said, and we spent 11 days total in the marina in those 6 months, or a harbor. So here's like the breakdown in 2025, kind of what some of these marinas charge. Now, we're in a 48-foot boat, so we're usually put in a 50-foot stall or a 50-foot slip. So most of these prices are for a 50-foot slip. So we stayed at Port Townsend. We had some friends there. We didn't plan on staying there, but some friends saw us on AIS, which is a tracker that you can track other boats on. And they were in Port Townsend, so we decided to stay one night there. That was $85. Our next stop was in Port Campbell, and we stayed one night there, or actually 2 nights there, which is it's a great marina. You get showers, and they have trash, and it's located right there close to the downtown, so you can go to stores or restaurants very easy. So British Columbia, or Campbell River in British Columbia, is a real good place to stop. Again, that was $65. Then our next stop was in Shearwater in British Columbia, which I would suggest you really check in before you go there. The dock's sometimes not in great shape. When we went there, we called them on the radio beforehand, and they asked, what type of power we want to plug into. I think at the time we told them 30 amp power, and we wanted a starboard tie, and they said, okay, there's plenty of room. Go ahead and, go up to the dock. So we ended up tying up and get off the boat, and a storm had came by apparently like 2 or 3 weeks prior and almost blew the dock completely off, connected to the land. And there was no power, there was no water, but they still ended up charging us $70 just to tie up. How do we do it again? Oh, and it was late in the afternoon. So how do we do it again? We would just anchor it out. There's a good place to anchor out there just away from the ferry dock that you could have stayed at, and it could have saved us $70. But We've been to Shearwater a few times. That was the only time we had really used the dock there. We'll probably avoid it if we go back up in that direction. Our next stop was Ketchikan. We stayed a couple nights there, usually to bad weather. There's not a whole lot of good places to anchor out near Ketchikan. In our boat that goes 6 to 6.5 knots, you kind of have to travel about maybe an hour to a good anchorage, depending on which direction you were going. So we ended up staying in Ketchikan a few nights. That was $67 a night. And then the last one is the most expensive one, is Sitka. A lot of the harbor there, the marinas are all part of the Sitka borough. They're really expensive. Sitka is really the only harbor up in that part of Alaska, so they take advantage, I think. So that's $90 a night for a 50-foot slot, and it's usually packed. To get in there, you'd have to contact the harbor master. So Sitka does have a first come, first serve sections. A lot of those are already taken up. There's a lot of fishing boats up there, and once they find a slot, they move into it, and they usually don't leave until the next fishing season, which is in the next springtime. So it's kind of hard to get a slot up there in Sitka. But again, that was $90 a night. So in total, like I said, we stayed 11 nights in either a harbor or a marina the last 6 months, and that was around $717 we spent. And then our last charge, or our last expense, was insurance. So doing the inside passage, or the western side of British Columbia, the Alaska, insurance can be expensive. We got a pretty good policy, but for 6 months it's $1,800 to do that, to have insurance on the boat. But in total, we spent $6,020 for that 6 months, from June to mid-November, doing British Columbia, Alaska, and then back down to British Columbia. So that's kind of how much it cost to run our boat for 6 months. And there's obviously some other things that I didn't put in there. I didn't put in smaller things, like if we went to, like in Sitka, we went to a fast food restaurant or whatever, but we don't usually eat out too often. There's some smaller things that like oil changes and that kind of stuff. I kind of loop that all in with the fuel costs. And then we also do have some maintenance things that need to get done. If you watched one of our prior videos, you would have seen that we snapped a paravein fish in half, which I'll show you here in a second, that we'll have to replace. And there's some other things on the boat that are either worn out or broke over the last 6 months. Nothing major, luckily, but you know, those are all prices that you pay to own a boat. So I hope you like our quick look at what it costs to run this boat. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We'll definitely try to get to them and answer any questions you may have, and really appreciate you watching. Thanks a lot, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing. Thanks.
看到这里的观众震惊了吧？纳尼，6个月6020美元，1个月7000人民币 ？Are you kidding？ 你要不要也来柴油鸭呢？评论区讨论起来吧！